What's good? I'm Carrie the Snail, and we're diving further into the world of romantasy, the world of ACOWAR. In my fairly recent quest of reading fiction again, you all have really lovingly come around me and shoved me down the stairs of romantasy. And now here I am, halfway through the series. So you know how this goes by now. I'm not gonna waste your time. First, I'm gonna discuss aspects of the plot. Then we're discussing the characters. Then the spicy moments. And then we're wrapping it up with the final review. Book 3, the third installment. At this point, I don't have to sell this book to you. You already sold your soul to the romantasy gods. You're here to talk about it, reflect on where we've been. Or you're just here for the hot sauce analysis of the sex scenes. Gotcha. I enjoyed this book a lot. I don't think as much as I enjoyed ACOWAR though, but I still had a great time. This book is the longest yet. There's more characters, there's more fairy politics, more character dynamics, and you better believe there's more sexual activities present. There's a grand sense of scale as we get to know more of the High Lords and anticipate the oncoming threat of Hybern. While I think the book and its size pulls off most of these elements, I do think there are times when there's like pacing issues, as well as some ideas that are undeveloped. But come on, let's get into it. Now, there is a lot going on in this plot, so I'm not going to talk about everything here, but I'm mainly just going to touch on some spots that really stood out to me. The plot has 3 distinct movements, or acts. 1, Faye and Lucia escaping the Spring Court and returning to the Night Court. 2, the Night Court crew working with the other High Lords and mustering up forces against Hybern. And then 3, the war. My favorite parts of the plot were the ones that outlined the iconic moments of the book. The escape from the Spring Court, really thrilling. The council meeting at the Dawn Court. And then, of course, the final battle. You know, who doesn't love a good final battle? It is pretty clear in this installment that Feyre is even more confident and capable than she has ever been. She has trained with her powers. She has proven herself. And now she needs to get back to her lands because she's High Lady, dang it! She's even more vicious too as we see her manipulate Tamlin and his court, which results in his people losing trust in him and ultimately leaving. And while she's at it, sticking it to Ianthe too. Now that Feyre knows her true nature, she catches her in a vulnerable moment and frickin' like mangles her arm. Feyre is not to be messed with. Then after the fight with Brana and Dagden, Feyre and Lucien, even though they're weakened by some Feybane, they use this opportunity to escape the Spring Court. They pass through a tunnel that leads to the Autumn Court, and unfortunately Lucien's brothers catch wind of this and start hunting them down. They're barely able to use their magic because of the Feybane. Then they make their way into the Winter Court. They're crossing this frozen lake. Lucien's brothers spot them and then track them while they're out in the open. Exposed with no way to defend themselves, our boys Cass and Az swoop in and save them. It's wonderful. They make their way back to the Night Court, and Feyre has her glorious union with Rise. They're running off to the bedroom as soon as they can. And now Lucien is here in the Night Court with them, and with his mate. Then, towards the middle of the book, we got to explore one of the new courts, the Dawn Court. It's kind of like going on vacation. At the point of this story, we really needed to see a new court with its High Lords and how they all mesh together. And while I was really glad to see them together discussing their plan of action, there was also a lot of drama. Tampon shows up. You can guess how that was gonna go. Tam starts mouthing off at Feyre, absolutely embittered at the fact that she like single-handedly made his entire court implode. But it is truly sad to see him in this state. At first, he was really sweet, and yeah, he wasn't like perfect. He's got anger issues, and once he came back from under the mountain, yeah, he was dealing with some possessive issues for sure. But it wasn't until Feyre ran off with Rise until he became straight up evil. You know who also went through that same arc? Dean. I am telling you, man, Dean was a great guy. He was such an ideal dude. And all of a sudden, Mr. Bad Boy comes out of the woodwork and Rory falls for him. And ever since then, Dean is making terrible choice after terrible choice because she messed him up so bad. I'm not saying it's her fault, but she certainly didn't help. Anyway, I am of the position that Dean is by far the most tragic character in Gilmore Girls. And Tam is kind of in the same boat here. Anyway, there's a lot of things about this part of the plot that I liked, and it makes the world feel a little bit larger to us. Feyre seeing the High Lords together and noticing what their relationships look like, making the world feel just a little bit larger to us. They have a history. And speaking of history, we get to know Helion a little bit more, who Feyre suddenly gets a strong suspicion that he's Lucien's father. This is certainly interesting, and it makes sense because of how different he is compared to his brothers. Not quite sure what this could potentially mean in the future, but this is definitely an interesting thing to learn. The council meeting was great. The visuals of the Dawn Court were really cool. I just wish we could have spent a little bit more time here. And then there is the final battle, a grand climax to the ever-growing threat of Hybern. While the forces of Hybern were great in number, Feyre and Rise managed to recruit these old gods of death, the Bone Carver, Bryaxis, and the Weaver. Things are close though. This doesn't ensure victory. victory. Just before they are on the brink of the failing side of war, Lucian shows up with more forces, along with Vasa, Miriam, and Drakon. And Feyre's dad. Woo! Yes! Oh, thank goodness. Remember that guy? Yeah, well, he's here now. But like, what's he gonna do? Dude's old and has a bum knee. I don't think he's gonna be super helpful. And he is not, because the King of Hybern snatches him and kills him in front of Nesta and Elaine, which was obviously devastating for the girls, but I can't help but feel very little impact from this, because we haven't even seen their dad since ACOWAR. He was completely out of the picture for ACOWAR, so him showing up just to die like a few pages later felt like just a convenient way to inject some shock value. Nesta, completely enraged now, awakens some dormant part of her power, like sonic waves of sheer Nesta rage. And while she doesn't know how to fight, out of pure desperation, she like force blasts the king. He then comes back upon Nesta, mostly unfazed. And then Elaine, out of nowhere, just comes out and like stabs him right in his neck. I'll admit though, I feel like the king died a little bit too quickly. I wish there was a little bit more of like a struggled battle here, where Nesta tries her best to access her newfound power. And I can't help but feel a little bit skeptical about how Elaine was just able to stab the king so easily. First, she has even less training and aggressive instinct than Nesta, and to me, she seems generally too docile and pacifistic to be capable of something like this. Also, wouldn't the king be like far too skilled to let like somebody not trained in combat sneak up behind him and stab him? I don't know, it might just be a little bit of a nitpick. I just kind of wish it was Nesta alone who fought the king, and it was like a very close fight. It would have been a great payoff from ACOWAR when Nesta is like vowing to kill him. The powers she starts to draw out are a great match for the king, but she doesn't really know how to use it, and she's not trained in combat, reinforcing how she should have trained for a moment like this. That her rage and uncompromising resolve isn't enough to protect those you love unless she harnesses it and trains it, develops it. I also thought it was cool that Feyre, in this weird connection with the cauldron, was able to see this take place across the battlefield in this weird meld of consciousness. But then suddenly, we found out that Amren betrays Feyre by not carrying out their original plan, and instead uses the cauldron to release her true monster form from her body and wreak havoc among the battlefield. The cauldron then explodes and enters this black hole state, where it will continue eating matter until it is stabilized and rebuilt. Rise comes in to help Feyre use their remaining magic to rebuild the cauldron, but it ends up completely draining Rise of life. I'll admit, while I was in disbelief, there was definitely a fraction of a second where I entertained the thought, like, is Rise actually dead? Could this happen? No, I came to my senses. Luckily, the other High Lords arrive, see what happened, and they offer him their kernels of power in order to resurrect him like they did for Feyre. And while Rise and his soul was like floating off into deep space, he happened to like grab Amren and bring her with him, so that now they're both alive. I'm not really sure how that happened, and I'll be honest, I kind of think Amren should have stayed dead here. Not because I dislike her character or anything. It's just that the war really turns in their favor quite well, and really the only thing that was lost was Feyre's father, which is fine, I guess. It just felt like things wrapped up a little too conveniently, and it was really vague how Rise was just able to resurrect Amren in her Fey form, so it just ended up feeling like things worked out a little too nicely for them, when I think it would have had more impact if she was actually dead, or if she was just like in her monster form running around the world now, and in like a future installment they had to like repackage her in her Fey form. Could have been an interesting side plot for a future book. And the thing is, she really isn't even in this book all that much. She's either reading or training with Nesta in the background or shacking it up with Varian. I ain't mad about how things turned out though. For what this story aims to be, I thought it was a perfectly exciting and climactic battle. Now that I've read 3 SJM books, I think I'm starting to notice what her strengths are. I think she's at her best when she's writing these character dynamics against the backdrop of this fantastical world. The focus isn't so much on the world, but more about the characters and how they interact with each other. And with this book, we are getting more character dynamics with the inclusion of Nesta and Elaine. See? Look, I know who they are now, okay? I know I got it wrong in the ACOWAR video, but I've learned now. I'm not a little ACOWAR infant anymore, okay? Now that these two have been made Fae, they are both experiencing a very intense disenchantment, now that their realities have been drastically changed. Not only theirs, but Cass and Lucian's too. Nesta and Elaine are now living at the Night Court, and when Feyre returns, she finds Nesta in a state of stern defeat, while Elaine is devoid of life and purpose. Cass, still having some feelings for Nesta, is being attentive to her. He's wanting her to train, and she wants nothing to do with him. He's all, Nesta, how are you today? Are you well? Are you willing to train and become stronger? Get the freak out of here, man. Would you stop breathing on me so heavily? What the heck is the matter with you? And then when Lucian shows up at the night court to see Elaine for the first time since he imprinted on her back in Highburn, he's in shock as she is just a solemn husk of who she was. He is gently trying to be there for her, but she is still thinking about Grayson back in the Mortal Lands, desperately hoping that he is still willing to wed her. Could we just take a sidebar for a moment and just let our hearts go out to these poor guys who are down bad here, just trying to build relationships with these women and getting utterly smacked down. Nesta, please, let me train you.
Get the freak out of here.
Elaine, are you alive? Can I get you anything? I see a bird. Far out on a distant land, I see a bird. And by day it has no feathers, but by night it grows flames. Okay. I get it though. These ladies are going through some really serious stuff and they're probably not emotionally available at the moment. But I can't help but have some sympathy for my kings out here who are they're just trying their best. You guys are doing great. You just gotta keep... Okay, well maybe not that. Az, you need to stop that. Az, stop that right now. While the character dynamics here are fun to read, I do kind of miss that tension you get from Faye and Rise and ACOWAR. It kind of feels like that thing that happens in The Office, where you're utterly obsessed with the Jim and Pam, will they, won't they? And when they finally get together, you're like, all right. So who's next? You can't draw out the will they, won't they too long because then it just gets obnoxious. Faye and Rise needed to get together at the end of ACOWAR, but I do miss that tension. This book tries to replace some of that tension with some of the other side characters who are going through it, and they're going through it. The balance of Faye and Rise finally being together, and now all these new characters and their dynamics is still a really fun and wonderful time. Then, of course, there were a couple big surprises that I don't think we were expecting. First of all, Jurian? Turns out he's a good guy. He's a team player. And my gosh, that was important because without him, they might not have been able to win this battle. Okay, that was a big one to get your head wrapped around, but now I'm good. I'm secure. I'm stabilized. And then they hit you with the fact that Moore is into women. No freaking wonder. She was acting so weird in this book. Coming from ACOWAR into this one, I thought the thing between her and Az was just like a long history of dancing around the pressing issue, which it kind of was. But it's because she's not particularly attracted to males. Of course. This makes so much sense now. There was this really strange point when Nesta was actually like showing some concern for Cassian's health, and then Moore gets like super territorial and aggro towards her. Cassian. I don't think I've ever heard his name from Nesta's lips. Cassian had always been him or that one, and Nesta had been pacing in the foyer as if she was worried. I opened my mouth, but Moore beat me to it. He's busy. I'd never heard her voice so sharp. Icy. Nesta held Moore's stare. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed, then tightened, as if fighting some battle to keep questions in. Moore didn't drop her gaze. Moore had never seemed ruffled by mention of Cassian's past lovers, perhaps because they never meant much, not in the ways that counted. But if the Illyrian warrior no longer stood as a physical and emotional buffer between her and Azriel, and worse, if the person who caused that vacancy was Nesta, Moore said flatly, when he gets back, keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. Whoa, dude, chill. I was like, where the freak did this come from? Okay, now it's coming all together. She was using Cass as a meat shield against Az. And that means if Nesta comes in and now wants Cass as her meat shield, she's gonna have to face things with Az. Now all the weird ways she was all like touchy-feely with Cass made sense. In a way, she was kind of trying to signal to Az that she wasn't really interested, because then she won't have to like come out to him, and probably the rest of the court too. But Az, as observant as he is, doesn't quite see what's going on. So I think Faye was right when she confronts Morgan. She's gonna have to face things at some point or another to be true to herself and be true to Az, to release him. Now, strangely enough, after reading this book, I think my favorite character is actually Nesta. I found her to be consistently interesting in like a closed-off, mysterious kind of way. Since ACOWAR, we know that she has a very stern and merciless exterior. But when she starts making certain choices like acknowledging Cassian for the first time or caring about his health, it's actually kind of a big deal. And it makes you wonder what's going on underneath the surface for her to make such an intentional move like that. And I found that pretty fun to follow. And not only that, we start to see more and more of her connection to the cauldron. Since she was made by the cauldron, she now has a sort of connection to it, power that she's taken from it. She shares a sort of conscious connection with this magical entity. And while at first it's very invasive, she slowly starts to learn how to tap into it and utilize its bond. It kind of reminds me of like the Harry and Voldemort relationship. Except the interesting thing is that it's with a magical object, not another human being. And so now that way, it's kind of similar to a Horcrux as well. However, the roles are reversed. It's not a human soul that's carried in a magical object. It's a human carrying part of the soul of a magical object. It's a pretty interesting concept, and I don't think I've seen a take on it quite like that before. And I thought it was just a great way to inject some of that looming tension of the King of Hybern and his advances. Speaking of advances, you know where I'm going with this? Spice time for all the Spice Girls and boys out there. In order to appropriately execute dramatic retellings of the spicy scenes, I'd be eating freaking hot sauce. Hot one's hottest sauce. Just do it, you little sissy. Just do it, you little sissy. This doesn't get easier. Here we go! Ooh. First things first. Faye and Rise are back together in the Night Court. They really be, how you say, enjoying the full sanctity of marriage. Ooh. I got like, you know, like a cold shiver, but it was a hot shiver. It was a spice shiver. It's happening. Once Feyre comes back from the Spring Court, they're reunited and they get it on. Any chance they get, they're just, you know, again and again. Oh boy, we're on the roller coaster now. Here it goes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's... His clothes vanish because of the magic. All of them. And his mouth angled over mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. Wasn't soft or searching. It was acclaiming. Wild and unchecked. Ah, the tears are coming. It was an unleashing. And the taste of him. The heat of him. The demanding stroke of his tongue against my own. Home. I was home. Turns out that with this book having the theme of war, that motif even finds its way into the bedroom. Or should I say the war tent. Tents are being made, if you know what I mean. Rise gets head in the war tent. He gets head in the war tent. I felt his shield settle around our tent as I unbuttoned his pants. As I kissed my way across the muscled pain of his stomach. Lower. Rise's hand slid lower into my hair as the rest of his clothes vanished. There's that magic coming in handy again. Coming in handy? Do you see what I freaking did there? Come on, you got to give that one to me. That was freaking good. I don't care what you say. Ah. My gums are spiced up. His growls of pleasure filled the tent, drowning out the distant cries of the injured and dying. Isn't that a little insensitive? Life and death, hovering so close, whispering in our ears. So can I point out something? Something I feel like I've overlooked for a while? Are the Fae like part animal? Oh, they're animal, all right, but they like snarl, they hiss, they growl. At first I thought it was just like a cute descriptor of how they would react to each other. But when I actually thought about what this looked like, it's kind of weird. Okay, so Faye and Rise are getting it. We know. They're going ham with their hams. Leave some for the rest of us, okay? But they're not the only ones this time around. After the council meeting at the Dawn Court, tensions are dying down. They all head back to their quarters. Helion shows back up, though, and we find out that he's kind of a freak. Ow, ow, ow. Helion threw himself onto the couch across from Cassian and Moore. It's been, what, 4 centuries now? And you 3 still haven't accepted my offer. Moore lolled her head to the side. I don't like to share, unfortunately. You never know until you try, Helion purred. Ah! The 3 of them in bed with him? I must have been blinking like a freaking fool because Rice said to me, Helion favors both male and females, usually together. In his bed, and he has been hounding after that trio for centuries. You're telling me Helion, Cass, Moore, and Azrael in one bed together? That sounds freaking dangerous. Sounds like a wild time that would absolutely destroy the bed and building that they're in. I considered Helion's beauty and the others. Why the hell haven't they said yes? Hey, maybe Feyre's a freak too. Let's go. Ooh, turns out Helion takes Moore up on her offer. Bring him back to bed. Feyre is so confused, though. Right after the display of Azrael beating the frick out of Eris, this must be some sort of attempt to push him away even further. The other weird thing you gotta consider about this, though, is that if Helion is Lucian's real daddy-o, Moore banged Lucian's daddy-o. These are the facts, okay? What do you want me to say? Neck sweats, you gotta love the neck sweats. And they are not the only ones getting it on either. Turns out, even Amren's getting some. Her and Varian, they're going heavy. Ah! None of us lasted long after dinner. They're not talking about sex. They're talking about the dinner. Amren and Varian didn't even bother to join us. No, she just wrapped her legs around his waist right there in front of us, and he stood lifting her up in one swift movement. I wasn't entirely sure how Varian managed to walk them out of the tent while still kissing her. Amren's hands dragging through his hair, letting out noises that were unnervingly like purring as they vanished into the camp. You gotta stop it with the purring, man. Hey, you know, I'm glad Amren's getting her share of Bing Bong as well. Ah! Eating something actually makes it spicier because you have to close your mouth. And then I just inhaled a chip bit. Oh. But you know who's the freakiest of them all? Varian. We cannot forget that Amren is actually a monster wrapped up in a fey body. Which, first of all, monsters like to fuzzy bump too, okay? But then what that means is that Varian's into some monster sex, man. He's performing coitus with monster kind. Obviously, it's more accessible to him because of the fey body, but what he really wants is some of that monster erotica underneath, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's into some of that stuff. Nasty. Varian's a freak, man. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but he is a certified freak. 7 days of the actual week. Lastly, we gotta talk about something brewing underneath the surface, and that's Azriel and Elaine. Don't spoil anything for me, okay? But when I first saw them interacting together, I didn't think much about it. Azriel was helping Elaine be more productive by tending to the garden. We know they're doing that in the background. It's no big deal. Then, because Nesta opened up a bond with the cauldron, the King of Hybern found out their location. So they kidnap Elaine. Feyre and Azriel go on an expedition to retrieve her, and then this happens. Azriel slid back the curtain. Elaine was in her nightgown, wrists wrapped in steel that glowed violet. Her eyes went wide as she saw us. I shifted my face back into my own, raising a hand to my lips as Azriel knelt before her. Azriel gently removed the gag from her mouth. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, devouring the sight of him, as if not quite believing it. "You came for me." The Shadow Singer only inclined his head. Okay, wait. When did this happen? What is going on here? Show me the receipts. What were you two doing in the garden? Okay, as far as we know, nothing's really going on between them. But there is an undeniable vibe happening here. Now that we know that Morganriel won't work out, this is actually a pretty good alternative. I never thought of them together because I was too focused on Lucian and... Oh, shoot. Lucian. Oh, this is problematic. Lucian's a great guy. He is. Do I think he needs to be with Elaine? I don't know. She's never really shown a true interest in him. She's mainly just jarred at the fact that she's Fae. I suppose they would be good together. It just sucks because they're mates. And I know that doesn't necessarily work out or whatever, but Az and Elaine, I could see that. They're both gentle, well-composed, and apparently very attractive. He's the incredibly observant spy, and she's also a seer now. Oh, hold on. Wait a second. That makes perfect sense. That goes together so well. Holy flip. Yeah, okay. I can get behind Elaine Real. As Lane, let's go. I ship it. It's gonna suck for Lucian, though. I mean, things are happening, bud. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it might not be in your favor. ACOWAR is the logical conclusion of this sort of trilogy that it kind of set up. I know there are a couple of more books after this and some loose ends of the story, but it felt like the ending of this book wrapped up a nice trilogy of sorts. Everything seemed to have concluded pretty well, and the only hint of some sort of threat in the future is that the immortal queens are out there still just sleazing around. It's not a perfect book though by any means. The biggest issues that I have with it mainly have to do with its length. Like I said, there was a lot going on in this plot that I hadn't even talked about, and I think that quantity can run the risk of spreading thin some aspects of the plot that really could have been developed more. Two areas in particular where I really felt like we needed more development was the inclusion of fantastical elements like Bryaxis, as well as the Mirror of Ouroboros. Bryaxis is a mysterious monster at the bottom of this library, and it actually completes the sibling ship of the Bone Carver and the Weaver. I disliked, however, that SJM really wasn't detailed with what this thing was, though. She can be very descriptive in her prose when she wants to, and in this case, I think she kind of shot herself in the foot by describing this thing as like beyond horrifying to the point where like Cass was like shook for weeks. When you set an expectation like that, you kind of paint yourself into a corner because anything that you could say about it is not going to meet that expectation. Bryaxis was a fantastical element that I felt like it really could have expanded more upon. Instead, it's just kind of this like vague nightmarish cloud thing. I imagined it as this sort of like dark cloud thing with many long and pale arms like coming out of it, which is more than I think SJM gave us about it. I don't know, maybe that was the point. Maybe she wanted our imaginations to run wild with it. But I felt like this was just a big opportunity for us to show us more about her world instead of leaving it vague. Another element that I really wished had more focus and development was the Mirror of Ouroboros. The Bone Carver made a bargain with Feyre that he would fight in this war if she can retrieve for him the Mirror of Ouroboros. However, she finds out that supposedly if you stare into this mirror, it will turn you insane. An interesting idea. But Feyre's just like, it's not worth it. And then until like the day before the final battle starts, she spontaneously decides, actually, I'm gonna go get it. And even when she does retrieve it, this sequence is like so rushed. In fact, it actually just cuts off. And then later on, we get a sort of filled in synopsis of what happened. What? Why? Apparently, when she looked into it, she saw the raw, animalistic version of her true self, personified as this big old scaly beast. And she has this internal battle staring out what she truly is. This could have been a wonderful opportunity to, again, expand more on the fantastical things of this world, but also like tell us something more about like who Feyre is now, what she thinks of herself, how she's coming to terms with who she is. But then she just quickly grabs it and tosses it to the bone carver like, here. And then the bone carver is like, oh, cool. I actually didn't want it, but I just wanted to see if you could do it. What? This could have been a device that had Feyre prove how strong and capable she is now, and how she's beginning to accept herself as a very powerful Fae. I don't know, I just think this was a really wasted opportunity, and I think the story could have really benefited from expanding upon something like this in particular. Another element that I saw take the backseat because of its size and scale is SJM's use of word painting. Using her prose to paint beautiful scenes. I'm thinking of the first time that Tam took Feyre out to that beautiful meadow. I'm thinking of that zany yet romantic time that Feyre first tried fairy wine at the summer party. I'm thinking of Starfall. Moments like these I think were very important to the series because they were so immersive. You get immersed into this beautifully oversaturated world that you hope you would never lose. Because of the really busy plot, you had less time for moments like these, where you can just take in the world and take in the characters, and I really missed that. Overall though, I think it was still a really enjoyable entry in the saga. While I do enjoy it, I think I might still like ACOWAR more. It felt like it had just a bit more focus and punch to it. Thank you so much once again for joining me on this romantasy journey. I really hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and maybe read some good stuff. Got a few things planned in December that I hope you all like, and yeah, I'm Carrie the Snail, and I'll see you the next time I'm out of my shell. Peace.